Hello, this is Take Your Medicine. I'm Jacob,
And I'm Sadie.
and we have a bunch of fun things to talk about today. Not too much newsworthy has happened. We got some abortion topics. We got some other random fun topics, quote unquote fun.
Right. You know, that fun abortion stuff.
Yeah, super fun. Routine baby sacrifice is about as fun as you can get.
Yes, that's pretty much been the only thing in the news for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so we got a couple of fun stories, and we'll probably have a lot of fun with this one. So
yeah, that's true.
you want to start with this one from the Post Millennial?
Yes, so this reads, liberals promote horse medication for women to take for abortions. The fact that he had to make the video at all speaks to the horrifying nature of the world we're finding ourselves in, Vice's Jason Kobler described. So, you know.
Of course, this is like, we're coming full circle now from the FDA saying don't take ivermectin because it's a horse medicine.
Right.
And now, yeah,
and
I'm
of
sure
course, the infamous CNN, Joe Rogan casual battle where they put the filter on his video after he got COVID, and he said he threw the kitchen sink at it and he took ivermectin, and then everyone at CNN was like, oh, he's taking horse medicine, and then Joe Rogan was like, I can afford people medicine, motherfuckers. And yeah, so hilarious. It's a very famous thing that we all know. Ivermectin is this horse medicine that Joe Rogan took, but a lot of people have taken for other things like what is that, river blindness, and something else,
other parasitic diseases.
It's an anti-malarial, I think, too.
Yeah, it's got a number of uses.
Anyway.
Mostly anti-parasitic, but yeah.
This first paragraph reads, following the news indicating the potential overturning of Roe v. Wade by the U.S. Supreme Court, Vice's Jason Kubler published an article advertising do-it-yourself advice on how women can make abortion pills at home.
It's ridiculous.
Oh, I put this twice. Oops.
Oh, oops. That's okay.
So this is what Vice tweeted, because they quote tweeted their article, I guess.
Yeah.
With the Supreme Court poised to overturn the constitutional right to abortion, an anarchist collective that makes DIY medicine has released detailed instructions for making abortion pills. And then Drew Holden, a blue check on Twitter, screenshotted these two things and said, horse drugs are good now, guys. And they're two tweets from the checkmark motherboard, which is Jason Kubler's Twitter account through Vice.
Oh, I
they
see.
call him motherboard, but
no, motherboard is a publication, isn't it?
No, it's Vice.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they call him like the motherboard or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But on the left-hand side, it says Rogan has recovered from COVID-19 and used his first show back to spread misinformation about the horse deworming drug he took. And then on the right, which just came out recently, the same person says, misoprostol, I think is how you say that, is relatively easy to acquire from veterinary sources, since in addition to medically inducing abortion, it's also used to treat ulcers in horses.
I mean, if there's any argument to be made that we're living in a simulation, this would be it. Like, this is just going in a circle.
If Defiant L's was still allowed on Twitter, this would have been a perfect Defiant L's, but
it's like you've got the left on the left-hand side and the right on the right-hand side, and you've got a wheel in the middle, like a wheel of fortune, and you've got horse medicine pegged on one end of it, and it's rotating around, and so it's going right-wing horse medicine, then it's going left-wing horse medicine.
It's really stupid.
The thing that's funny about this, though, is like, I'm not even that opposed to people concocting medicines at home if there's a shortage or if they're banned or whatever. Don't do that. That's not an official recommendation, but theoretically, I'm not opposed to people making their own medicine if they know what they're doing, particularly if they themselves are doctors or chemists or whatever, especially when drugs are being artificially limited, or in the case of like we're dealing with supply chain issues, if they're just not available.
Right.
So it's like, I don't even have a problem with people repurposing veterinary medicines for a variety of purposes. In theory, don't do that. But
right. Like, if you're so terrified that abortion is going to be illegal and you can get your hands on veterinary medicines to abort your baby still, I mean, I don't I don't know about this one specifically, because if it's aborting a human life from another human life, that has to be a pretty powerful drug. And it makes you wonder what other things it could be destroying and damaging. At least in the case of ivermectin, it was already vetted for use in humans.
Right.
We don't really know that misoprostol can be used in humans because there are some veterinary medicines that are strictly for animals.
Right. Yeah.
So, yes, it probably induces an abortion because it's doing a lot of damage to your body that it's not supposed to do.
And I want to be clear, like, I'm not in favor of abortion pills just generally. Like, in this case, I'm opposed to people doing this, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, for medicines.
I am opposed to abortion medicines also, but you also cannot prevent people from doing that on their own if they know that a horse medicine can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just like, it's so funny, and this is what's related. So Tim Pool. So I'm gonna set the stage here a little bit before I look at this screen here. So there's something called there's an idea in politics, I forgot who thought of it, but it's called Horseshoe Theory.
Okay.
And the horse theme.
Right.
Horseshoe Theory is like, you imagine a horseshoe. It's like a U shape that tapers at the end, right towards. So the idea is that the people on the far left ends of the spectrum, so if you take the political spectrum and bend it into a horseshoe shape, the people on the far left ends of the spectrum are closer ideologically to the people on the farthest right ends of the political spectrum. So they're both authoritarians, they're both racists, they're both all of this stuff. They're closer together than the left-wing moderates and the right-wing moderates that are more at the top of the horseshoe. So that's the idea, since that taper happens. And so Tim Pool tweets this thing. It's from, and I don't know if this is a meme, but it says the political compass, which is a popular, determining where your political views are.
Right.
And he says, getting horse-pilled means waking up to the realities of cheap veterinary medicines for human use. And the meme says, Horsepill Theory. And it's got the center, which is BoJack Horseman.
Right.
And then you've got the left, which is what you just said, the Marsoprostol or whatever it's called. The abortion pill veterinary medicine. And on the right wing, you've got the ivermectin, and it's like the horse tube paste.
The paste, yeah. The sour apple paste or whatever.
So it's just like the meme about horse pill theory.
That's so funny. Getting horse pilled. I like it.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
I just think that's just something.
I get notifications from the Post Millennials Telegram on my phone. And so every time they post a new story, I get, the headline notification, whatever. And this one popped up and I could not stop laughing. I was like, are you serious? Are you kidding me right now? How do they not even realize the hypocrisy? I mean, do they just not care? Do they think they can get away with it? Or
it's just a clown world. If you needed more evidence that we're in a clown world, there you go.
We're definitely on the clown timeline.
So I guess while we're on the subject of abortion pills, do you want to do the gamers hate babies?
So I saw this from the Washington Post, and I thought it was interesting, and I don't know if you had seen this, but
I have.
I wanted to see what your opinion was on this, since video games are and the realm of program companies is more your thing. But this is from the Washington Post from Launcher, which I guess is like their video game branch of the Washington Post, whatever. But the headline reads, as Roe v. Wade repeal looms, video game industry stays mostly silent.
Okay. Oh, that's just the title again.
In the wake of a leaked draft Supreme Court opinion essentially confirmed that Roe v. Wade's days are numbered, most of the video game industry's biggest companies have remained conspicuously quiet, though not all. First of all, how is it conspicuous that companies not related to the government are quiet? I just don't understand.
Well, it's conspicuous because everyone is accustomed to all of these companies taking the radical left-wing position on literally every single issue.
I guess I just don't assume that video game companies are going to be political in any way. Like, to me, they just seem inherently apolitical. Well, or they should be.
They're not, because that's actually, like, you think about the people that are like into gaming. These people are the Rainbow Coalition. They're watching anime all the time. They're nerds. They're outcasts. They're probably depressed and wasting too much time on video games. And what we're starting to see in the case of like Overwatch, for instance, is that they're making new heroes. So it's a hero-based shooter. They're making new heroes, but they have, I wish I had taken a screenshot of this, but they actually have like an internal measurement on, it's basically like intersectional theory for their character design. So they're like, okay, well, we don't have enough like black, strong, lesbian, butch women, so we're going to design a hero that has that first. So instead of starting with the, instead of starting with a theme and saying like, what kind of hero would be cool to make in terms of abilities and playstyle, they're starting with, we need to increase the diversity in the game, and we need to add lore that this person's gay and that person's gay and this. So they're like injecting all of this social construction nonsense into the characters themselves.
That's so weird.
And that's because the people that go and work at these companies are all left-wingers. Like, video game companies are like the big tech companies in terms of their wokeism, but worse because those companies have tons of artists as well.
Right.
So like the artists are more likely to be those people that are just overtaken by a misguided sense of empathy and understanding, which leads into this really perverse sort of idea about representation and inclusion and all that.
Well, that makes sense, I guess. But
yeah. So, but people don't realize, because like you're not involved in video games. I'm a little bit more so. So I know that all that's happening. But yeah, to an average person, they probably have that same assumption as you, like, video games are just video games.
I really don't play video games, so I don't know what the trends are.
Yeah. I mean, there was a whole thing that happened a couple of years ago called Gamergate, and I think it was basically about like feminism in gaming. Basically, one of the core complaints was that video games, which are made primarily for young men, were like over sexualizing females and stuff like that, and that was a major complaint of it. And so you saw a movement away in a lot of video game companies from making sexy women in their games. They needed to put more, like I said, butch black lesbian women.
That's so stupid though.
Yeah,
that's really stupid because, man, I wish I knew of a good study off the top of my head, but there are numerous studies in psychology journals that say that men and women are equally drawn and attracted to attractive women. Not in like the same way, not the same attraction, but if you had to pick between a good-looking man, a bad-looking man, a good-looking woman, and a bad-looking woman, men and women all would look at the good-looking woman, and the other three would just be completely ignored.
Yeah.
So that's a stupid thing to do anyway, by taking out your attractive characters in your games, because even if women are playing the game, they are drawn to attractive women as well.
Right. And
which is interesting.
Isn't the whole point of video games, like, the whole point is that it's that fantasy escapism, that you're not going to experience things that you experience in real life. And so, like, making every character beautiful beyond belief, like the men are like ripped and jacked and super strong and super handsome, and the women are gorgeous. Like, that's all. Everyone understands that that's fantasy. Everyone understands that average people on the street aren't going to look anywhere near that.
Right.
And you're certainly not going to be, sending like earthen spikes out of the ground at a horde of goblins, right?
Right. It's like, it's just silly to try to combine reality with fantasy. But anyway, this article continues. The Washington Post contacted 20 major video game companies about whether they plan to make a statement regarding Roe's potential repeal or provide employees with monetary aid in places where abortions would no longer be available. Only Microsoft and Activision Blizzard responded with statements.
And I want to make I don't know if this will get into it, but obviously these corporations are hesitating now about the social issues that they vocally support. And I wonder if we're going to start, I wonder if the pattern is going to hold that the smaller companies that feel vulnerable to political attack are going to start refraining from offering up political stances as a company, because I think you have Activision Blizzard, which is one of the largest video game publishers in the world, and you have Microsoft, which is also, well, it's got Windows and all that stuff, but also is one of the largest video game publishers in the world.
Right.
So it's like they have a position where they're almost unassailable because they're giants.
Right.
So I wonder if that's making them still feel emboldened to take responses, but other smaller studios and smaller publishers are probably like, they're going to be worried that they're going to run afoul of some state laws or something, or get their benefits stripped away like Disney did in Florida.
Right. I mean, Ron DeSantis made a very good example out of Disney, because that is a multi-billion-dollar international company. And just like that, he took away all of their protections and rights and tax cuts and all of this stuff, and they're going, what just happened?
Right.
He did that so fast their heads are spinning. So he did a good job at making an example out of them for other companies.
It was a metaphorical public hanging, basically.
Basically,
like,
yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna hang Disney in the town square, and then look out at all the rest of the woke corporations and said, "You want to be next?"
Right. And there's been some legal debate on whether he has the right to do that or not, without getting too into it. But because corporations have certain rights, and we don't want the government to be too involved in granting or taking away those rights. But it's kind of an interesting legal debate. But anyway, this statement put out by Microsoft says, Microsoft will continue to do everything we can under the law to protect our employees' rights and support employees and their enrolled dependents in accessing critical health care, which already includes services like abortion and gender-affirming care, regardless of where they live across the U.S., because those two things are critical health care.
Yep.
It goes on, this support is being extended to include travel expense assistance for these and other medical services where access to care is limited in availability in an employee's home geographic region.
So they're basically going to pay to subvert state laws.
Right, which I don't think is, well, I guess it's legal, but it's not right.
It makes me so uneasy. Like, the fact that an individual could go and get quote unquote gender affirming care, which is actually gender delusion affirming care. That's bad enough. And it's bad enough that doctors exist that would actually willingly prescribe that stuff. Right.
Right.
Because when people are depressed, clinically depressed and suicidal, doctors don't go, well, we're just going to euthanize you because you identify as someone who should die. We don't do that.
Well, there was a story of a young woman who was trans-abled, and she blinded herself with drain declogger or whatever.
I heard about that.
And her psychiatrist helped her do it.
Yeah, so this is the thing. It's like, you should not. I don't know why it's a controversial thing to state that doctors and healthcare providers should not be doing anything destructive purposefully.
Right.
Like, gender quote unquote affirming care is just a mutilation of a healthy body, because the issue is mental. It's not physical.
Right.
And there's no amount of physical mutilation that you can do to bring your mental state into alignment with your physical state.
No.
It's like,
no.
But the fact that companies are going to go and advertise this as a benefit, like, hey, if you work for us and you want to chop your breasts off, we'll pay for it. And we'll even fly you out to California if you need to have the operation done.
Well, and this is for anyone who works for Microsoft, but also their dependents.
Right.
So if their children want gender affirming care, if their children want the drugs and these surgeries, they'll pay for their children to travel and have all of this done.
Yeah.
That's horrible. Also, I want to know what insurance companies are paying for this.
Well, it could be just the companies paying out of pocket.
I mean, maybe, but that's kind of unheard of.
It is, but if you have to keep your rabid woke employment base aligned with you, then... But also, let's be honest, like, the people instituting these benefits are probably woke themselves, the management.
Right.
They're probably viewing it as like a good for
HR
society.
Person is probably like purple haired. And...
I think it's somewhat of a mistake to just assume that that the management is just sort of bowing down to the woke employees, because I think every single level of management is the woke employee.
Right.
So it's like...
That's true.
What's the difference between keeping your employees happy and literally being ideologically overtaken from top to bottom, you know?
True. Anyway.
Yes.
So this one is about
Bungie,
which is another, I guess it's another video game company.
Yeah.
Inside the company, the reaction has been mostly positive. Quote, super awesome that we are leading the way in the industry space with a strong stance, said one current Bungie employee who, like others who spoke with the Post, did so on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the subject publicly. It's weird to me that more people aren't coming out and standing up for basic human rights.
How about the basic human right to not be mutilated by a doctor?
Or killed by a doctor before you're even alive.
Yep.
Activision Blizzard, a prominent game developer facing multiple lawsuits and investigations over its corporate culture, and CEO Bobby Kotick provided a brief statement on abortion rights late Tuesday evening, which, if you're already in hot water, maybe you just should shut up, but... Quote, "We are committed to an inclusive environment that is supportive of all of our employees," said Rich George, a spokesperson for Activision Blizzard. "As a company, providing fair and equitable health care is a top priority, and we will closely monitor developments in the coming weeks and months." Right now, within Activision, there are many employees distracted and scared for the future, said Emily Neef, I guess, a senior motion graphic designer at Blizzard who is trans. So, a man.
Yep.
A man. Mr. Kotick made a commitment to improve the working conditions of the many lives that work under him and make Activision the best company it can be. And I can say without hesitation, as of right now, he's failing all of us.
Yeah.
So...
I don't know. This card I said it's men all the way down, because in the article, I didn't clip it, but they talked about Gamergate and how, there wasn't enough feminism and all this stuff, but they were saying that it's primarily men in the fields and it's primarily men that play video games and all this stuff. And then I'm like, okay, so it's just men bitching about stuff on behalf of women, but there aren't really women bitching about it themselves. And then you have this trans person who is just a man bitching again about women's stuff. Because this Emily character also is quoted as saying something else about abortion directly and how it's necessary or something like that. And I'm like, you're a man. You never even will be pregnant. So why are you even talking about this? If the idea on the left is that you don't have a uterus, so you don't have an opinion. Sorry, Emily, you're cut out of the conversation. So it's just men all the way down. This is the logic is just, it's so incoherent. The people that need to twist themselves in knots just to make their worldview stick together. I mean, it's just a left-wing pro-abortion activist would say, if you're not a woman, then you shouldn't have an opinion. But then that same left-wing activist would say trans women are women, and so they can opine about abortion.
Right, but then after that became a trope, then women started saying no uterus, no opinion. So then only trans men could talk about it because they're actually women with uteruses.
Oh my gosh.
And then the non-binaries that are actually just women who are confused could also talk about it. But then when we talk about healthcare rights for all until it's abortion, and then people are like, women should be able to do this and women should be able to do that. Not whatever, birthing people. That hasn't come back up, surprisingly. Probably because they got a lot of backlash for that one.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Doesn't make any sense. And that kind of is funny because yesterday was the Women's March in Los Angeles, and Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire rented a plane to fly a banner that said, "What is a woman?" All day long, it flew over this parade, which is hilarious because he just released a book and a documentary called "What is a Woman," where he went around for the last year and asked people about it. But I want to see that documentary, but I'm not a member of Daily Wire, so I probably won't get to watch it. But he put that out and then he tweeted about it with the hashtag "What is a woman?" And then a couple hours later, the hashtag had completely disappeared from the trending. Wow. It was number 9 in trending all day long yesterday. And then after Matt Walsh tweeted that, they just completely took it off the trending list. So he was successful, I guess. But he was interesting how "What is a woman" is no longer trending after it was just number 9.
Yeah, that's so Twitter. Bizarre.
It's funny. So
yeah, I don't know what to say about this. The logic is just so incoherent at every level. It's just I don't know. It has to fall apart. It has to. There's no way that this amount of illogic can stand for that long of a time. Yeah. Because you don't even have to be particularly educated or skilled in debate or critical thinking to realize that none of this makes sense at all.
No, but the left is very good at quickly changing their talking points.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you'll call them out on something that is clearly false or wrong, and instead of them trying to fight you tooth and nail on it, they just switch their argument like immediately.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? We're talking about something completely different now.
Yeah, that's the Mott and Bailey argument, right?
Yeah.
Where they say something outrageous, you call them out on it, and then they retreat into something that's unobjectionable. The classic example is with CRT, right?
Yeah.
So they'll say, you know, white people are inherently oppressors, black people are inherently oppressed. Somebody calls them out and they go, oh, you don't want to teach the real history of slavery in the United States. So it's like, or the real history of racism in the United States. So like I think that's the Mott, where they retreat to a more defensible position after they've been out here with this really ridiculous position. So
I see. Because somebody did that who was protesting outside of Amy Coney Barrett's home. She said something like, I don't see why a judge who's never birthed children herself should have a say in Roe v. Wade. And the guy that was interviewing her was like, well, she's birthed 5 children. And then she was just, and then the person, without skipping a beat, just goes, well, not everyone wants to have 5 children or 3 children or 1 child. And that was it. That was their whole argument. They didn't even say, oh, I didn't know that she had birthed 5 children. They just glossed over it like it was.
I think this is
like it was nothing.
This is the manifestation of the ends justify the means.
Yeah.
They only want abortion to be legal all the way up until birth, and probably post-birth too, some of them. And they will use any dirty trick to that end. Mm-hmm. And this is why the ends justify the means is so dangerous, is because you will throw out logic and reason in the pursuit of an end that you think is noble and justified. And the problem is that you don't see yourself becoming corrupted when you engage in that. And so these people, they don't care. Their sole goal is abortion. They're not interested in rational debate. They're not interested in making logical sense. They're interested in confusing as many people as possible, screaming as many slogans as possible, leveraging empathy as much as possible, weaponizing it as much as possible to get what they want.
Right.
They don't care. They don't care about the well-being of the child. They don't care about the well-being of the woman even.
Yeah.
They just want this one outcome, and nothing, no logic, no reason is going to change their minds because they start with the assumption that their end goal is just and pure. And so there's nothing you can do before they reach their goal to convince them otherwise. They will not change course. I mean, this is generally speaking. Some individuals are different, right? Some people will see the light, so to speak. But this is why these people are dangerous, is because they will just pursue their ends until they achieve them. And then they'll run away with the power that they have after they've achieved them.
Right. Well, and this is just further proof that this is a secular religion.
Yeah.
And this cult that these leftists are a part of, like we talked about a few weeks ago, is truly just a secular religion, because the Catholic Crusades were like that. The ends justified the means. Then, they thought they were given the power by God to use wrath and violence for a worthy cause, and they killed numerous people.
And the Muslims on the other side
and the
were doing the same thing.
Muslims on the other side, still to this day, are doing that same thing. The Taliban took back Afghanistan in 3 days.
Yeah.
Their ends have always justified their means. They got their ends, did they not? But after how many decades of terrorism and Sharia law and
children suicide bombers.
And all of that is continuing. But funny how we don't hear about that anymore now that we are not in control of Afghanistan. And so it's just these religious wars that have gone on for decades are still continuing, even though everyone who is a part of it now in our country is not religious. They are part of a secular religious war, and their ends justify their means in their minds, which is why they burned our cities 2 years ago. It's why they are now breaking laws to protest outside of justices' homes.
This is why I like the Christian framing of there are inherently evil acts that are impermissible no matter what.
Right.
And that framing on the world basically ensures that you never become corrupted. And if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you need to do an impermissibly evil act to achieve a goal, then your goal is wrong. Right? So it's like that's a useful framing to examine your actions as they happen in the pursuit of an ideal. And if you hit a roadblock and say, well, I need to commit an act of impermissible evil in order for this to be accomplished, well, there you go. There's your roadblock. You have to stop your action, right?
Yeah, it's hard as a mostly rational person that I am to understand how anyone can take a roadblock like that and go, okay, it's going to be difficult to get there. It's going to require me to do more evil things to get there and still push on and follow through with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's that they just aren't thinking about it, or if that they are truly evil and they know they're evil, or they're just so indoctrinated into their cult that they're told that what they're doing is not evil and it's actually good, which I think is probably more likely.
Yeah.
They're just so in their cult, and cults have their own moral structure, basically.
Right.
They have thrown out everything that society has said over the course of a long period of actually indoctrinating you into the cult, but eventually the social norms and morals and contracts that you're used to prior to being in the cult have gone by the wayside, and you now have whatever the cult says is right as your new moral structure. So I think these people don't see themselves as being evil, but they also don't look at it and go, well, my neighbor might think that it's wrong, so maybe it is wrong and I need to re-examine. They just go, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm just going to do it.
Right.
Because my cult hierarchy says I have to.
I think that all of that's right. And I would also add that I think they just have an inherently utilitarian worldview. So,
yeah.
Like a utilitarian worldview would be, for instance, like, you have this one child and you need to kill the child to save 1,000 people. It's just a contrived theoretical, right? A utilitarian would say, well, it's unfortunate, but we have to save the 1,000 people. To exchange one life for 1,000 is the appropriate way to do things, right? But like a Catholic or a Christian view on the world would say, no, you cannot kill the child even to save 1,000 people, because that is an act that is intrinsically evil. Right. You can't do that. And so Christianity guards against, right at the source, any sort of utilitarian thinking. Right. That's kind of a broad generalization. But when you have those intrinsically evil acts, then you can't really think utilitarian. It's either like you have to treat each instance of your actions as its own event. Yes. Say, what am I doing now? Is it intrinsically evil? Is it going to be intrinsically evil? Yes, can't do it.
Well, I think the more broad basis for that too is that it is not your job to determine which lives are more important than another. So like if killing one life would save 1,000, that's not your job, because you're playing God then. Christians say, we are not going to kill any of these people, and if they should die, that's an act of God. Yeah. That is for God to decide if they should live or die. And if we are the ones making that decision, you are now playing God, and that's a sin. And you're not supposed to make decisions for God.
And once you get a taste of that power, it inevitably ends up snowballing in
becoming utilitarian.
Right. This is why millions of people died in the Soviet Union, is because they decided, well, we just need to get rid of this group of people, and then we'll have our socialist utopia. They found out, oh, killing people is like really good for our political ends, so we're just going to keep doing that. It's like. Yeah. It's like a slippery slope in a way. It's intrinsically evil. So it's just like all of those things put together just means that a utilitarian worldview is not good. It's just not good, period. And these people, these abortion people, they're thinking of it utilitarian, right? It's like, oh, the woman isn't going to be able to, forward her career or complete her education, or, she's going to bring a child into the world that's poor, and we don't want that, so we can kill the child. It's like, it's a purely utilitarian viewpoint. It's like, well, we think that killing the child is going to create more benefit for the mother, so let's go ahead and do that. Right. And then they couch it, they use word think. They don't think any deeper in all their positions. They hear the word human right. Abortion's a human right. Automatically accept. They don't think about it any deeper, right? It's the same deal with like Black Lives Matter. They hear that phrase, you automatically have to support it. It's like they don't think about what's underlying the words that are being used. They just hear a good sounding word, human rights. How dare you oppose human rights? So you just call anything you want to do a human right. It's a human right to exterminate X group of people. How can you oppose that? It's a human right. Right. So it's like these people don't think. They don't think, and they're utilitarians. And that's just like, I think that's the combination. I think that's a deadly combination.
Yeah, I was listening to Janet Yellen talk about this the other day. She's the Secretary of the Treasury?
Yeah.
And she talked about abortion completely like a utilitarian because she was talking about just economic consequences of women getting pregnant. And she said, if there's young Black women that are getting pregnant, I'm paraphrasing, but she said if there is young Black women, presumably teenagers or like early 20s getting pregnant and they're still in school, then they're not ready to start a family, and they should have the right for an abortion because they need to pursue their education and all this stuff. And I'm like, how about instead of telling them that they can have an abortion, we should be teaching them to preserve their bodies and not participate in the act that could potentially end with a child.
Right. Because
if they are engaging in these acts with young Black men who have no economic prospects, who have no career prospects, then they probably shouldn't be engaging with those young men anyway.
Right.
So maybe we should be teaching these young girls that they are worth more than some deadbeat, and they should probably just wait until they've finished school, if school is what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's a good thing for them to go to school, instead of saying, well, you made a mistake, but you can just erase that and it's fine. And then you can focus on making money for the government, and that's better for us.
Yeah.
Which is basically what Janet Yellen was saying.
Yeah, that's the other thing to add on to that. They want to be able to do anything without restriction, free of consequences.
Right.
They don't want to play a prioritization game, people on the left. They want to have everything equally and avoid the consequences of all of it. They want to have an education, but they don't want the debt. They want to have, promiscuous sex, and they don't want the child that inevitably comes from that, right? And so it's like, you can't live your life like that. You can't just disregard the consequences of all your actions. I agree that you should have the freedom to do whatever you want, but that also comes with the adoption of the responsibility of the consequences.
Right.
If you as a woman want to prioritize school over a family, go do that. But I'm not paying off your student loans.
Right.
You're responsible for that. If you have a kid because of your own actions, your own irresponsible actions, you have to, I don't want to say you have to deal with the consequences because it's the child we're talking about, but you cannot just disregard the consequences. You engaged willingly in an act. You decided to do this. It ended up in a way that you didn't want. You don't get to back out of that.
Right.
You accepted the risks when you started the endeavor.
Right. Well, and then, play devil's advocate, people will say, well, what about rape victims?
Right.
And I've been thinking about this a lot too. I'm like, have we all just forgotten about adoption? Just because you were raped, it is a tragedy, yes, but that does not give you the right to take your anger out on an innocent child by killing it. That's not your job.
Right.
If you really think that you cannot look that child in the face every day without getting angry and aggressive, give it up.
Right.
Give the child away. If you hold that baby for the first time and you're like, I'm never letting this child go, then you are not allowed to talk about the fact that it was from a rape ever again.
Yeah.
It's your child, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this argument too, where, these women that are deranged say it's my body, it's my choice. And then they'll say, it's a fetus, it's a parasite. And I'm going, how can you argue against this? Because it's wrong when you hear someone say that a baby is a parasite, but how do we know that it's wrong? So I was thinking this argument through today. And I think these women forget that this baby has 50% of their DNA. The difference between there's a lot of differences between a human baby and a parasite, but the difference is you didn't just acquire the parasite from somewhere else. You created it. It is half you.
Yeah.
It literally has 50% of your DNA. So it's not a parasite. And it actually isn't your body, your choice, because that baby is its own body. But they also disregard that because they just want to dehumanize it completely so that they can get an abortion. But I don't understand how you can compare a fetus to a parasite. It just sounds wrong.
Well, you can't.
It just is gross.
This is my point about the words. They'll just use whatever words they need. They get the connotations across. They'll just pick whatever word has the right connotation and they'll throw it at you.
Right.
And that's going to that's going to work on a certain segment of the susceptible population. You know, you have somebody that's not paying attention, that doesn't think deeply about moral issues. You go up to them and say, abortion is a human right and a fetus is a parasite. They're immediately going to feel like, oh yeah, that's right. Because all you've done is thrown words with connotations at them.
Yeah.
But you haven't asked them to think more deeply about it. And I think this is maybe a white pill cause for optimism, because I think the only people really wrestling with the moral issue are the pro-life people. And I think that when you really wrestle with the issue, the only conclusion that you can come to is a zygote, a fertilized egg, is a human life.
Right.
And deserves all of the rights that go along with that. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the absolute cleanest position that you can take that doesn't create any moral gray area. And that's the only conclusion you can come to, because like the trimester stuff, like saying, oh, well, you can abort a baby up to 15 weeks. Well, it's like there's an implicit admission in there that the life has value at some point during the pregnancy. And so to me, it seems like a fool's errand to like use our rational capabilities to decide, well, here's the exact point in the pregnancy when this fetus has human rights. It's like, that doesn't make any sense at all. If you're going to ban abortion after a certain period of time, then you're making the admission that this life is worthy of protecting. So why are you creating an arbitrary like zone? Well, it's okay to disregard the human rights in this first period, but after that, it's not. What? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I forget what I was listening to or reading, but someone said, I don't remember any of these details, but when researchers are using like fetal zygotes for human research, which is another moral debate in and of itself, but when they're using those fertilized eggs for research, they can no longer use them after 12 weeks. They have to kill them basically after 12 weeks, because then it's getting into like human experimentation, because then you start to form like your facial features and things, and like your spinal cord and stuff. So then it's like you can't do anything with that anymore, because it's distinctively a human baby now. Even though it's really little, it still looks like a human in a weird way. It's like a human head with just a tail, basically. So it looks really weird, and it's now considered a human life. So even the 15-week bill is, I mean, they're all morally wrong, but that one seems to be extra morally wrong. Like anything, if you try to push it past 15 weeks, it's like if you're not even allowed to do stem cell research or human experimentation past week 12 of a zygote that you created in a lab because of bioethics, then all of the other arguments are thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Like in our state, we have a 6-week heartbeat bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the law where we live, is after 6 weeks, you are not eligible for an abortion anymore, which if you're going to make exceptions for rape and incest, 6 weeks seems like a decent amount of time, because you know if you've been raped and you know if you've had incestual sexual relations, probably against your will. So that's plenty of time to go to the doctor and get blood work done and see if you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Because the blood tests show a lot faster than the urine tests, and then you can abort whatever you have if you're pregnant, I guess. But I think that's wrong too. But 6 weeks seems like the most rational number that you can come up with.
Yeah, I mean...
But then that argument is, well, a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant until 6 weeks. And it's like, well, then you were voluntarily engaging in the act. Because if you're not even concerned about it...
The point that you made earlier, though, it's like... Okay, yeah, let's say you banned abortion except in those cases. Well, now you're dealing with the question that you talked about earlier, which is like, why are you punishing the baby for the sins of the father?
Right.
So it's like, even in those cases, I know you said you think it should be wrong, but like, if you're going to ban abortion and leave those cases open, well, then it's like, just close those cases too, because those don't hold up either.
Right.
So it's like, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get your point. But should we talk about this one since we're on the topic?
Yeah. So this is also from the Washington Post, and it is an article about a poll. Majority of Americans say Supreme Court should uphold Roe, post ABC poll finds. A majority of Americans say the Supreme Court should uphold Roe v. Wade, the landmark ruling that established a constitutional right to abortion, a Washington Post ABC News poll conducted last week finds. With the Supreme Court poised to overturn the right to abortion, the survey finds that 54% of Americans think the 1973 Roe decision should be upheld, while 28% believe it should be overturned, a roughly 2-to-1 margin. And then I actually went to the poll data, and it's interesting to see the trends, I suppose, but this was question 11 on a telephone poll that they surveyed 1,004 United States citizens. And this question says, as you know, abortion law in the United States is based on the 1973 U.S. Supreme Court ruling known as Roe v. Wade. Do you think the Supreme Court should uphold Roe v. Wade or overturn it? And as of April 28th of this year, 54 people said uphold, 28 said overturn.
54%, I think.
No, this was raw numbers.
These are raw numbers? That's a small sample size.
Or I guess it is. Yeah, I guess it is percentage. 54%. Because it was 1,004 people.
Okay, yeah, so this is percent.
54% said uphold, 28% said overturn, and 18% had no opinion. But last year, the number for upholding was higher.
Right.
So it's actually dropped. The support of Roe v. Wade has decreased by 14% from last year to this year. And not even a full year, because it was November of 21.
Right.
So in a very short amount of time, what is that, 5 months?
Something like that. Yeah.
Five months? It dropped 14%. So that is a good trend in the right direction.
Right. And I'm expecting that trend to go, like, if they ask this question after Roe is overturned, I'm expecting that number to go even more down. Like, people are going to agree with the decision to overturn.
Yeah.
Why? Because people don't understand what Roe is. They just think that Roe is like, says that everyone everywhere can get an abortion, which it does. But when you rephrase the question, or when you recenter the question on should the states have the ability to determine abortion law, then I believe a majority of respondents agree with that statement.
Right.
So Roe just makes it legal at the federal level, which a lot of people say abortions should still be legal, which is terrible. But then if you say, well, what if you just allowed the states to do it instead of the federal government, which is what overturning Roe would do.
Right.
And most people agree with that too. So it's like, it's kind of a bad poll.
Well, so that's interesting that you say that, because the next question is, should your state make it easier for women to have access to abortion, make it harder for women to have access to abortion, or leave the law on women's access to abortion as it is now? And as of this year, April 28th, 22, 33% said easier, 25% said harder, leave it as it is now was 36%, and no opinion was 6%. But again, I guess it's the opposite. Well, no, I guess, yeah. In 2019, only 24% said that it should be harder. So it went up a percentage.
Yeah.
And the leave it as now number has gone down. But
I mean, the way to read this is like a good chunk of each state has a population that thinks that the abortion laws are basically fine.
Right.
So it's like overturning Roe really isn't going to change that.
Right, because between harder and leave it as it is now, if you combine those two, it's a stronger percentage than the people who say easier.
Exactly.
So these polls try to make it seem like, oh, see, everyone supports it. But if you already have abortion laws in your state, or heartbeat bills or 15-week bills or whatever, and you're okay with that, and you just want to leave it as it is, then you could kind of care less if Roe v. Wade is overturned, because you already have something on the books about abortion.
Right.
And then this is comparing it to, would you like to see the Supreme Court make it easier to get an abortion than it is now, make it harder to get an abortion than it is now, or leave the ability to get an abortion the same as it is now? And 45% in 2018 said same, and 30% said harder, and 21% said easier in 2018.
So most people are basically just like, we want the status quo.
Right.
And Roe is just going to keep the status quo, except in states that have a large pro-life coalition. So there's going to be some states that ban it. There's going to be some states that expand it, like California and New York. But then the rest of the states are going to be like the same. Because if Roe gets overturned, that doesn't have any implications for any states that don't want to further restrict abortion. They're just going to leave it as is.
Right.
So it's just like this whole thing is nonsense.
Right.
In a way.
Well, in 1992, 47% said, should it be easier or harder for women to get a legal abortion? 47% of people said it should be harder. So the trends have been going down, like it's been decreasing, but that's over, 3 decades that it decreased, and it didn't even decrease by that much.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess what you could say is that a lot of people wanted to make it harder in 1992. Lots of abortion bills have been passed since then, making it harder, heartbeat bills and everything like that. And now you've got a huge chunk of people that say, okay, we're in a good spot now.
Right.
So I then you still have people that still want to go down, but
it shows that there is still a good chunk of people who are against Roe v. Wade and any kind of abortion legally, but you can definitely see how our culture has been influencing even just the average person, because these are trending downward. And, of course, the Washington Post is trying to be like, look how great this is, but it's actually not great. Not that great. So it'd be interesting to see what their questions look like post the overturning, because I think it is probably going to be overturned, despite, or maybe because of all of these protests, they're probably going to be like, no, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I don't imagine the Supreme Court being an institution that's going to back down. I have this impression of the Supreme Court that might be wrong, but like when they get politically challenged like that, I think they're going to double down, because they're a co-equal branch of the government. They're not They're not beholden to the executive. They're not beholden to the legislature, and they're not beholden to the public either, which is by design. So if they're being threatened by the public, if they're being threatened by the legislature, by the president, I think that they're going to stand their ground,
which
and
is all illegal also.
Right. They're going to stand their ground and say, no, we're going to assert our authority on this issue because we're a co-equal branch. We're overturning this precedent. Yeah. They're not making any new law.
No.
They're not stealing power from any of the other branches. They're just saying this. They're not even overturning legislation.
No.
They're overturning their own institution's prior decision.
Right. So they were the ones that decided it, so now they're revoking it.
Right, exactly.
They're going back to it and redeciding. But I mean, these protests by these individuals and legislators and the president, that's all illegal. Trying to intimidate is illegal. So I'm hoping what the Supreme Court does, because I think they're also in support of it 6-3, which is interesting. I mean, that's what the rumor mill says, but it'd be interesting to see if that's actually how it goes, because then it's like they really did find that the Constitution has no legal precedence for this act. But I'm hoping that after they overturn it, they also just go after everyone who threatened them, because it is illegal.
Yeah, I don't know
if they're allowed to do that, but I hope somebody does.
I think the Supreme Court has like their own police force, but
because it would be interesting if they like the organization Ruth sent us. Like, I want the Supreme Court to go after them specifically.
Yeah.
Because they put out a written statement to like threaten the justices and things.
See, I don't know if they have that power though. But
it would be but it is, cool. I mean, it is illegal though. It's a federal law that you can't intimidate anyone involved in.
The Department of Justice is not going to do anything.
And
the problem is that the power to prosecute resides in the executive branch.
Right.
And so if Biden doesn't like what's going on in the Supreme Court, he's just not going to investigate the leak. He's not going to arrest these protesters because they're doing the foot soldiers for what they want.
I wonder if a federal judge could do it without Biden's approval.
I don't know how all that works. Like, that's always been a question in my mind. Like, how does the Supreme Court enforce its rulings? Like, the Supreme Court is basically just like ruling on stuff, but then they're leaving it up to the executive to enforce it. So the Supreme Court could like say, hey, executive, you're doing something that's illegal. You have to stop. What happens if the executive just ignores them? What are they going to do?
Well, I think if the executive ignores them, doesn't the Senate have to step up and also police the executive?
They could, yes, but why would they do that?
I guess they're not going to do that either.
Right.
Because it's a Democrat-run majority. So until the midterms, nothing's going to happen.
If you've got two branches of government and the Supreme Court makes a ruling that you don't like, you could just ignore it. Because there's no one to enforce it. Which is probably what
will happen.
Well, yeah. I mean, what will happen is, the federal government won't be able to go into states and punish them for banning abortion, but the federal government might decline to assist states in investigations regarding abortion.
Right.
Right. So like the FBI. What the hell is the FDA? The
it's FBI. The FDA and the FBI combined.
The Federal Bureau of
Administration.
Anyway, should we move on?
Yeah, we can move on.
Let's talk about public health agencies losing authority. So this is from Political. It's Political. Wow, we're going downhill quick. This is from Politico.
There you go.
It says, headline, quote, "It's a tsunami. Legal challenges threaten public health policy." You'll love to see it. So first snip I've got here. Litigation invites litigation, said Wendy Parmet, facility co-director at the Center for Health Policy and Law at Northeastern University.
Faculty co-director?
What did I say? Facility?
Facility.
It's a cycle that creates enormous uncertainty about what the CDC could do going forward should the pandemic worsen again, or should another pandemic or even a more regional outbreak arise. Wow. Regional outbreaks? I wonder whose authority that would be. Perhaps the state, which has the region that's in question. So this goes on.
Doesn't every state have its own branch of the CDC?
They have their own health administration. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So next snip says, the constant threat of being dragged into court is having a chilling effect on local health officials that may last well beyond the COVID-19 crisis, leading health commissioners or board of health members to think twice about enacting public safety measures.
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
One word answer.
Fucking good.
I mean, that's basically the point of this article. Is just like, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So, why are you complaining?
Who died and made you king?
Right.
Like, the whole point of public health is to do things that's in the public interest. I'm a member of the public. If I vote for my representatives, I want them to represent me. And if my representatives say, these health measures are too draconian, we're not doing that, that's my decision.
Right.
Yeah, COVID still exists. Yeah, whatever outbreak is happening still exists. But I, as a member of the public, have decided that it's not a high enough risk to put the other aspects of life at risk.
Yeah, if you work for a board of health members, I pay your salary with my taxes. So you have to do what I say.
Right. And these freaking people at the local health agencies and the CDC, they're singularly focused, right? These are people that are virology nerds. They just want to get the spread down to zero no matter what.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting over here going, well, I'll get sick. I don't care. Right. I don't need you to protect me. I don't need you to force me to wear a mask on planes. I don't need you to tell me to socially distance from my family and not have Thanksgiving dinner. I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I've decided that it's not a risk to me. And I don't recognize your authority to tell me what to do.
And here's the thing. I'm going to get sick and I'm not going to tell you about it. What are you going to do then?
Right.
Hey, guess what? All your cases will go away if everyone stops telling you about them.
Exactly. And it's like, I'm glad that people are hammering them with litigation. It's about time. These people, no one gave them this authority.
You should be scared of the people who employ you.
Right.
Have you ever had a boss before? Yeah, you should be scared of your boss.
So this goes on to say, other federal agencies that watch over Americans' health have also come into the court's crosshairs. In January, the Supreme Court struck down an order by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, that mandated employees in businesses with over 100 workers be vaccinated or tested, though it upheld the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services vaccine mandate for workers in Medicare and Medicaid participating facilities.
Right.
The court is also considering a case that could limit the Environmental Protection Agency's ability to regulate air pollution, among other things. I don't know why they threw that in there, probably just scaremongering. And then it says, many of these decisions fit a worrying pattern, public health experts said, in which judges do not appear to be taking scientific evidence or expertise on board.
That's because that's not a judge's job.
Right. There is no amount of evidence that you can present me that will convince me that taking away fundamental rights is necessary.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Scientific evidence and actual human rights as laid out in the Constitution don't go together.
Right.
They just don't. Scientific evidence is not a consideration when you're dealing with constitutional rights. Just isn't. Sorry.
Yeah, this goes back to our conversation about utilitarianism. These people are just ready to throw away fundamental rights when they're inconvenient. Right. They say, oh, we have all of this data. We have all this danger. It's going to be negative for your health outcomes. So, yeah, the Constitution says this, but we need to disregard it. We need to take the power in order to protect the public. And it's like, no, the Constitution is designed to protect me from freaks like you.
Right.
And if a judge is going in there and saying, you can show me all the scary graphs you want, Constitution says you don't have this authority.
Right. Well, that's the same argument with gun laws, with the whole 2A debate. You take any data that you want about gun violence in inner cities or rural areas or what have you, take it to a judge. They're still going to say, the Constitution says you are allowed to have a firearm to protect you. You're allowed to bear arms whenever, wherever. I mean, we have different types of gun laws, but they're probably all unconstitutional.
Right.
But, you know, the Constitution says in black and white, you are allowed to keep and bear arms.
Right.
That's it. So you can say, oh, the gang violence is really bad. We got to get rid of guns on the street. And the judge is going to go, that's not my problem.
Right.
We can't do that.
And the Constitution also says that Congress is supposed to make the laws. So if the CDC is making up laws wholesale and no one's challenging them, I mean, it's blatantly unconstitutional. You cannot. You are an agency that was established by the Congress with certain authorities. You don't get to just say, well, since we're public health, we get to write rules on how the public interacts.
Well, to be fair, I think Congress backed them through all of this.
Well, I wouldn't use the word backed. I think you're right, but I would use the word just look the other way, because that was a whole politically contentious issue. And the way that the system is set up, unfortunately, is that Congress is not going to voluntarily inject itself into contentious issues if it's isolated in the executive branch, right?
Okay.
So, like, if the CDC is doing whatever it's going to do regarding restrictions, why would Congress get in the middle of that mask, no mask debate, social distancing? They're not going to do that.
The only way they would is if Biden had said, hey, this is a problem that this agency is doing this. Congress, you need to back me up and say that this is a problem.
Yeah, if our system was healthy, the first people to be involved would have been Congress. They would have brought in experts from the CDC, gotten the CDC data, and then written laws about public health for this instance.
But they kind of got around that because they weren't laws, they were mandates. They were always meant to be temporary.
Yeah, well, they were executive orders.
Right.
And so you had a situation in
which...
But
they're not really laws still. I guess they are. Executive orders are weird.
They are weird, but it's like the CDC issued an order essentially requiring masks on airplanes, which is under the FAA. So it's like they were taking direct control over the rulemaking of another agency, and that's not really allowed.
That is really weird too, because I'm surprised the FAA didn't just say pound salt. Because it's not like people were going to stop buying plane tickets. The people who were really scared just wouldn't have flown.
I think the rationale is that since all of these agencies are connected to the president, then it's just like, what difference does it make if the CDC makes it versus the president? Because like the CDC just go to the president and the president says, I'm the head of the FAA, so you need to put a mask mandate.
But that's how it should be.
I don't even think that. I think that the idea that the president should have health emergency powers at all shouldn't even be a thing.
No, I mean, that's not exactly what I meant. Like if the FAA needs to make a new law, the president should be overseeing that.
Right.
So if the CDC says, I think the FAA needs to do this, they should be telling that to the president, who then says, FAA, you need to do this. Instead of the CDC going, well, we're not really going to involve the president. We're just going to do this.
Yeah. And
if I was the head of the FAA, I'd be like, get out of my face.
Right.
Talk to the president first.
Yeah. The problem is that, so in the same way that Congress was just letting the executive branch do its thing because they didn't want to get in that contentious issue, it's the same deal within the executive branch. The president is using the CDC as a political scapegoat and just saying, well, this is what the CDC says. They're saying to do X, Y, and Z. My hands are tied. I'm just following the science. So like Biden and Trump to some extent like dissolve themselves or separate themselves from the responsibility of the political blowback to the CDC. Because everyone, even, I admit I'm more angry at the CDC than anyone, but I really should be angry at the entire system that allowed that to happen. The CDC is basically just the scapegoat. Yeah, sure, they were given lots of leeway to do whatever they want, and I don't want that to happen again. But also, I think some of our anger is misplaced because all of these people in the background did nothing. Our Congress did nothing. the president just did whatever the CDC told him to do.
All of these administrations that are under the executive branch just need to be dissolved.
I agree.
We need to just go back to executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch.
I know. All right, there's one more piece of this, and it says, in Washington State, Secretary of Health Umair Shah says this litigious atmosphere, and particularly a decision like the Florida injunction against the CDC's travel mask mandate, has ramifications for public health policy across the nation. He says it's part of a broader landscape of anger and vehemence against public health officials and public health policies that is making it harder for them to do their jobs. And again, what do you say?
Good.
Yes.
I don't really care if you're a public health official, and it's harder for you to do your job now.
If you think part of your job involves controlling my life, I don't want you to have a job, period.
Right. If you gotta have a job, then I'm glad it's difficult for you to do anything. I'm glad that you can't just wield power willy-nilly anymore. And also, if you're throwing a tantrum at the fact that you can't control people anymore, public execution.
Metaphorically. I wouldn't go that far.
It depends on if your name is Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. Walensky, or what's the other one? Leanne Wen. Those three, maybe it's not so metaphorical.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to just have them barred from public life.
Pull their medical licenses or whatever licenses they have. Pull their certifications. Make them into the subject of public humiliation, and then prevent them from ever working in a government job ever again.
Did you say take away their pensions?
That too. Well, I think if you get stripped of all of your medical licensure and everything, you're basically disgraced anyway, so you probably shouldn't be getting pensions.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, we need...
Try them for treason.
Whatever happens, we need our public officials, elected and unelected alike, to be scared of the public.
Yes.
I want you to be fearful in your job. I want you to be scared that any decision you make could be met with intense blowback by the public.
Right. It'll prevent you from doing shady things in the background. It'll prevent you from making disgusting decisions. Mm-hmm. You need to stay on the straight and narrow.
These people have such a backwards view. You are there to serve us.
Right.
You're not there to control us. You're not there to use your own little big brain to restructure society. You're there for our use.
Yes.
And if you're getting in our way, then you're of no use to us. Right. Goodbye.
This is a little off the path, but that's why I like Madison Cawthorn so much, is because a few weeks ago he went on some random podcast that I've never heard of before, and he was saying that because he's a younger guy in Congress, the older people will come up to him and be like, hey, do you want to do drugs and do this promiscuous stuff with us? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he said, now watch, I've said this, so now you're going to start seeing things come up about me. And it's just because they're angry now. And he didn't even name names, right?
Right.
He just said that this happens. And everyone's like, well, that doesn't really happen. And then you saw that he was at a party and dressed in lingerie, and he was like, that was just a joke, but they tried to drag him through the mud for that, and then they tried to, there was something else they tried to...
Well, there's Venmo messages where he sent his buddy money, and he was like, for the quickie in the bathroom.
Yeah. But it just sounds like he's just being a dumb young guy that's funny and knows how to have a good time. And he's even come out and said stuff like that, like it was a joke.
Right.
If it was something shady he was actually doing, he'd be coming up with lies. He'd be saying that never happened, but he's like, oh no, I sent that. Oh yeah, I took that picture. Right. It was all in good fun. It was all whatever.
That sounds like something that me and my friends would have said in college. Thanks for the quickie in the bathroom.
I've seen messages like that on Venmo from mutual friends I have that they're sending money to other people, and it's like, what is... I don't really want to know what that is, but I think it's funny that he called it and it's happening.
Right.
And it just shows you that it is rotten from the inside out.
Yep.
And I think it's just making people like him more. And it's because he is on the straight and narrow. He is doing what he's supposed to be doing. And he's not fearful of the people that employ him because he isn't hiding anything from them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that picture was just on his social media. It wasn't even hard to dig up. It was just it was just there.
Yeah.
If he was ashamed of it because he was doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing, he would have tried to scrub that from the internet. Mm-hmm. I don't even think he tried to do that. I think he ran for Congress and all that stuff was up still.
Yeah, and funnily enough, seeing a politician that's not trying to put out this front of being super polished and clean is refreshing. It's be a normal person. Normal people say crude things. Yeah. Normal people do things in their past that they might regret or make them look ridiculous. Right. And it's I I'm done with sterilized politicians, like these people that are trying so hard to be so clean and thoughtful. It's like, no, just be Marjorie Taylor Greene, be Madison Cawthorn, be Donald Trump. Like, those people are refreshing because they're normal people. At least they seem like normal people. I don't. Politicians are still like, ooh.
Yeah, right.
But like, I'm so sick of, like, just be a normal American.
Yeah, don't hide from your past. Don't try to reject things that you've done or said. Just own it.
Yeah.
I think people like Madison Cawthorn are really appealing to the younger crowd too, because one, he is young, but two, he isn't trying to be like, I've been in Congress forever and take me seriously. He just hangs out. He just is doing his job, and I think that appeals to like millennials and Gen Zers more, because we can relate more to politics if we see people that are just behaving like a millennial or a Gen Zer, you know? Yeah.
Cool. All right. Final story. You ready to cover this one?
Yeah. So talking about people who need to do their freaking jobs because we pay them to do their freaking jobs. This is also from the Post Millennial, this is very on brand for them. But this says, revealed, teachers brag about ignoring parent requests to use children's birth name pronouns. This, I just couldn't even believe I watched this.
Are we ready for it?
Yeah.
What should we do if a parent requests that we refer to their child by the pronouns associated with their sex assigned at birth instead of their preferred pronouns or their pronouns, and that we use their legal name instead of a student's chosen name?
So I could respond with something that I've done. This came up for me. It's come up in a couple different ways, but it's come up for me where caregivers asked, I actually referred to their child's name in an IEP meeting using the name that the child had asked to be referred to and their chosen pronouns. And the caregivers reacted really strongly and then followed up with me and the principal and said, like, I noticed that you were using a different name than my child's given name at birth and the pronouns that we gave them. And I'm respectfully asking that you use the name and the pronouns that we gave them. So the laws in every state are different, obviously, and I can't speak to the laws in everyone's particular state, but I will.
Sorry to pause it, but immediately goes to talking about laws. Doesn't talk about whether it's right. Doesn't talk about a desire to respect the parents' wishes. Immediately goes to, how can I finagle my way in this situation to do what I want to do? Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but keep going.
I'll say, again, the resources that we'll give you after this have some helpful sites where you can go and look up what the rules are for your state. But before I responded to the caregiver, I made sure that I had I ran it by my principal and my superintendent just to make sure that that they had my back. And then I responded, I chose my words carefully and I said, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I tried to really like affirm what the caregiver was asking me. Like in terms of, I was like, I hear you saying that, you're feeling uncomfortable with me, using the child's preferred name and pronouns. And I hear that you're using different ones at home. Here at school, the expectation is that all of my students feel comfortable and welcome in my classroom. So in my classroom, I will refer to your child by whatever name and pronouns that they've told me they feel most comfortable with.
Anything to say right here, or should we keep going?
I don't have anything to say in particular, but
it's pretty shocking. Is there more?
It's a little bit. There's more. It's pretty shocking.
Let's keep going.
And just had that be it. Almost like the guidelines that I try to use when I'm like explaining hard topics to my students, like less is more. I just say like, it sounds like that really works for you at home and you can absolutely choose to do whatever you'd like at home in my classroom. And I even say like every year I start out my year by like sending home information to caregivers that says like, just so you know, like this is an affirming class. Like one of the ways I affirm students is I call them by the names that they asked to be called by and use their correct pronouns. So just like really, I just told them that maybe that's not helpful, but I just told them no, like respectfully no. And because I had my principal and my super's support, there wasn't much they could do. And they eventually kind of found another, another like topic to like squawk about. And they, sorry, that's not professional, but anyway, and they left that alone. They kind of got over it.
Wow.
Similarly to what Kieran said, at my school district,
we can listen to these
LGBT...
other two if you'd like, but that one was really the main.
That was the main one.
The main thing.
All I can think about is how disordered the society is when the parents' wishes about how their child is being raised, essentially, are blatantly disregarded and supported by the public school system.
Yeah, because this person said their principal and the superintendent both were in support against the parents. These parents pay your salaries, and you're telling them no. I'd pull my student out immediately. Like this person said, they found something else to complain about. And it's like, if they're finding a lot of things to complain about, maybe you need to evaluate.
Yeah.
But I would not have just found something else to complain about. I would have pulled my child from that school.
Yeah, or at least hammered it more. It seems like the parents didn't put up much of a fight based on that retelling. I don't know.
I mean, they could have, but
right.
and then, they said, oh, well, there wasn't really anything they could do. It's like, that is wrong. The parent should have many options for having something to do where their wishes are being respected.
Also, that it's really disturbing about this situation is that obviously at home, the parents are trying to say, no, you're not, to their kid.
Right.
Like, no, this is what you were born as. This is what you are. But the kid is still insisting when they're in a school environment to be called by their preferred pronouns and name. So it's like, obviously the parents aren't the ones that engendered this gender confusion.
Right. They're probably
they're the ones fighting it, and yet
where this came from.
The kid keeps going to school and demanding that they use the affirming, I hate that word, the delusion affirming name and pronouns.
Well, and I understand that you want your students to feel comfortable at school because when they're comfortable, they learn better.
Right.
If you're feeling embarrassed all the time, you're not going to ask questions because you feel like you're stupid. You're not going to learn. You're probably going to fall behind if you're not comfortable with your teacher and your fellow classmates. Fine. But making them comfortable does not mean going against what their parents ask. You can still make them feel comfortable while using the name and the pronouns that they're supposed to be using. Those things are not in contention. You don't have to just ignore the student because they said they want to be called something and you are not following that. You're going by what their parents have said to call them.
It goes back to what we were saying, like this, affirming classroom. It's like there's no thought given to how that approach could be destructive, right? You could set up a comfortable classroom where there's limitless donuts and beanbag chairs and you don't learn anything. Is that going to be the ideal situation for a student to be learning? No.
Right.
Well, it's I want to make sure all my students are comfortable and they're in a comfortable classroom. And so that's why we don't do any work. We don't do anything difficult and we eat endless amounts of donuts.
Right.
That's obviously wrong. That's obviously not what you should be doing. In the same way, if your affirming classroom is going against the wishes of the parents, which is no doubt going to create more strife at home, which is going to confuse the kid more. Yeah, affirming sounds good, but it's not. It's being actively destructive in this situation.
Right. I also just want to note that this panel was a meeting called Creating and Sustaining GSAs in Elementary Schools. I don't know what a GSA is, but
Gay Student Alliance? Is that what it is?
Oh, could be. And it was held on April 26th by the moderator, who is this lady in the white. And she's a second grade public school teacher at Harvey Milk Civil Rights Academy in San Francisco.
Wow. Harvey Milk.
Harvey Milk. That creepy, pedophilic, gender experimenter who is now dead, thank God. But he's the one responsible for starting all of this gender nonsense when he mutilated that one boy and then was like, we'll just turn him into a girl and he'll be fine. And they were twins, and both the twins ended up killing themselves in their 20s. So
also
now he has a civil rights academy named after him. Also, why the frick is there a freaking civil rights academy anywhere in this goddamn country?
For the people just listening, guess if there's a bearded man with pink hair.
Also, can you guess that the main person speaking was a transgender?
Yeah, trans man.
Yeah, it's a lady without any
You can
breasts.
tell because the helium voice.
Right.
That sorry, ma'am, those weren't puberty blockers. That was actually just helium. Those weren't.
It is ma'am.
All right, that's everything that we have for today.
Yes.
Thank you all for watching and listening. I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And yeah, this was Take Your Medicine. Be sure to check out any of the links in the description wherever you're watching or listening so you can follow us. And yeah, that's it.
Go hug a baby.